This is part 4 of 4 parts. So the first level of confrontation is to meet the need directly. So let me give you some examples. A colleague of mine, a psychiatrist, physician, called me in the middle of the night. He and his wife had been coming home from a party, and she had slipped and tripped and fallen and hit her head on the corner of the concrete step on their front door, and he was calling from the ER. So I went out there and walked up to him, and he started describing to me the number of centimeters of penetration of the wound and how many centimeters in diameter the damage was and the prognosis to which part of the brain, like that. And I just looked at him and I put my arms around him and he burst into tears. Okay, so the substitute behavior he was going to was all his medical, adult, rigid ego state. That was not what he needed at that point. He didn't call me in the middle of the night to give me a diagnosis. He called because he needed something. But by the time I got there, he was disconnected from it or trying to. Similar example, in a meeting, professional colleague sitting next to me, and she's talking, and she's talking, and she's talking and 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 talking, and what you're experiencing while I'm saying that over and over and over again is what everybody else in the room was experiencing. They would start rolling their eyes and looking away, and she would talk and talk and talk. And I just put my hand on her arm, and she deflated in the middle of a sentence. Now, I wasn't treating her. I was taking care of myself because I was so uncomfortable with what was going on. But in fact, what she was needing desperately was strokes. The more she talked, the fewer she was getting, the less recognition she was getting. The more desperate she was, the more she was putting out the substitute behavior. And when I made the intervention of deciding that what she needed was strokes and meeting the need, the energy went out of it just like that. Okay. So it's a very powerful intervention. It's also a very dangerous intervention for you to take the position of identifying what somebody else needs.
Particularly a client.
Particularly a client, and moving in there to give it to them. It's very powerful, can be very effective. The issue is, what do you do next once having done that?
Because they want to follow you home.
Yeah.
Or take you home with them.
Yeah. Yeah, this is easy to run through in logic. When you're actually dealing with people and doing it, there's a whole lot attached to it. Yeah.
Would you say, and I'm sitting here thinking it probably is, the substitute behavior is always dysfunctional?
No.
It depends on your definition. It's dysfunctional in the sense of it never meets the original need.
Yeah.
But it can be socially very functional. It can be, it can be very rewarding. You can make whole careers out of it. Lots of people do.
For example, we were with somebody that we know who has had a distinguished academic career that at the age of 75 is still publishing books and still being invited to different countries to teach. And in every outward way looks absolutely fabulous. And she confided that she had had a very, very difficult childhood, that she was cooking the meals for the family when she was 6 years old, otherwise nobody would get fed. She learned to take charge, to be responsible, to manage the world. Now, you can't really say that that's dysfunctional. There are levels at which it's extremely functional. It never got her need for nurturing met on that level. But she made a life decision that
That's the way I meant it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not dysfunctional in the psychological way, but it's, it can be very socially acceptable.
Sure.
Alcoholic.
yeah.
Functional and end up being a very positive script.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Can be, but
Still doesn't meet the need.
yeah.
And there's a price to pay. And some people, go through most of their lives without paying the price. You don't see them in your office.
Yeah. Yeah. They don't show up to get fixed.
Right, because they're doing okay. but every now and then something ticks them off and they get very, very sad, or they get sick for a while, or something happens, there's a price. I mean, life is imperfect, and we deal with what we got. And most of us, when we're working with people, deal with the pain when stuff comes up, and so this is about how do you deal with the pain. But a lot of things we accommodate.
The logic behind meeting the need is that the intention, I mean, my intention with the examples, the first one, well, both of them were to meet the need, but in a treatment situation, what you want to do is focus the person's attention on the sense of relief that they got and try and get them back in touch with what the original need was that was driving all of that. They may or may not be open to that input. They may hear it, they may not hear it, but at least from a treatment perspective, that's what you're trying to do, is you're trying to get them to use that experience of relief to point out to themselves how important that actually was, what that original need was, and how disconnected from it the substitute was. You know, that's what you're hoping for in the way of insight. Another level of intervention is to focus on the behaviors that would be naturally expressive of the original need. Morris Hamowitz, one of the old-time TA people, once wrote an article called something like 1,000 Strokes.
25.
25 strokes, whatever.
Wear mismatched socks.
Yeah. Deliberately do things that will generate strokes for you. You know, it doesn't matter whether you feel like doing them or whether you're in touch with the need, but trust me, you need strokes, so if you do something like wear mismatched socks, you can count on somebody speaking to you at least once during the day.
Shake hands with everybody in the class every morning.
Say hello to somebody using their first name. And he had this long list of things. But the point, and a lot of therapeutic interventions, and particularly the ones we were using working with the developmental model, were to prescribe to the person specific behaviors to practice, to do. I'm working with a client by telephone, and I'm picking up an issue where the general issue is she doesn't know what she wants, so it's hard for her to negotiate for it with anybody else. So how do you get a person back in touch with the part of them that knows what they want? Well, from a developmental point of view, that's an exploratory issue, and what I'm prescribing that she do is go into department stores and touch everything, and go out in the country and examine closely a square foot of ground, you know, and see everything on it, and do things that are exploratory, do things different, taste food you've never eaten before. Prescribing different behaviors with the idea of that once the person behaves that way, they'll have an experience of getting the need met, and they'll begin to reframe, refocus this natural cycle again.
Okay. In terms of getting somebody in touch with what they want, there's another model, another intervention, behavioral, that I use. I ask somebody to carry an index card with them, and every time they think of something that they want, every time they see something that they want, or are reminded of something that they want, write it down, and do it right at that moment, because they'll forget it if they don't. It's part of a process that we have used that I have in a paper that I'll give you a handout of, and it's again in the yellow book.
Or carry a little digital recorder and record it so you don't have to write
just
while
so
you're
that
driving.
there's a list of it, and then ask people to start going for what it is they want. Start taking steps to getting it. But there are a lot of different avenues that get you to this place in the model.
Okay, so confronting substitute behavior by basically ignoring it and prescribing in some way, or encouraging or teaching alternate behaviors. There's a bunch of exercises we may or may not get to around stroking. All of those are natural behavioral expressions or prescribed behaviors that produce strokes. Okay. The highest level intervention is to simply call the person's attention to the question of, when you were doing that, what were you really needing? And sometimes people can answer that. More often than I would have believed, actually, when I first learned about this. I tried it on with a client simply because a trainer had told me to do it, and I had no belief whatsoever that the person could, in fact, identify what they were needing when they did a particular behavior, but in fact they did. And then we started talking about, well, what could you do besides this substitute to get that need met? And we start designing, behavioral procedures to produce that. So all of these interventions, either meeting the need or prescribing a different behavior or just focusing the attention, are designed to get the person out of performing the substitute behavior and back into the loop, the okay loop of naturally expressing what they need and getting the needs met. And if it doesn't work, correcting and finding something that does work. That's the framework, and that's how it fits together. That's what we're up to. This is the end of the presentation. Please contact us directly if you'd like more information.